February 26, 1991. Just days after the beginning of the ground war during the Gulf War, a convoy of thousands of retreating Iraqi soldiers is attacked along a 3-mile stretch of Highway 80 in Kuwait. After 10 hours, the road gets the chilling moniker, the Highway of Death. Hundreds of vehicles are destroyed, and an unknown number of casualties are inflicted on the retreating Iraqis. The destruction and devastation received heavy criticism at the time. Recently, on Twitter, there have been renewed calls accusing the United States of committing a war crime. In this video, I plan to address these claims that the Highway of Death was a war crime, and spoiler alert, it wasn't. Using actual international law, I hope to prove to you that the attacks on Highway 80 don't come anywhere near the level of being a war crime. While I normally wouldn't worry about someone farming engagement like Hassan has by sparking this conversation again, I notice that there are many who wholeheartedly agree with this blatant misinformation. I think it's important to counter these claims when possible, especially when someone with a platform as large as his is the one spreading it. Before breaking down the war crime accusations, let's look at the actual incident itself. On February 24th, the U.S.-led coalition began the ground war to force Iraq out of Kuwait pursuant to UN Resolutions 660 and 678. Resolution 660 demanded Iraq to withdraw from Kuwait, and 678 authorized member states of the UN to use all necessary means to uphold and implement Resolution 660. This ground war came over a month after the beginning of one of the most intense air campaigns ever executed, and 7 months after Iraq invaded Kuwait in early August 1990. Within days, the ground campaign had thoroughly begun to break through and force the Iraqis to retreat. The success was far quicker than the coalition had expected and was a testament to the effectiveness of the air campaign. As the coalition began to rout Iraqi formations, Saddam Hussein issued an order to conduct a fighting withdrawal from Kuwait at 1:35 a.m. on February 26. Iraqi troops began a hasty retreat. Many stole civilian vehicles along with the belongings of Kuwaiti citizens in order to make their way out of Kuwait City alongside tanks and other armored vehicles from the Iraqi Army. These forces made their way along Highway 80 that leads from Kuwait City to Basra, Iraq. At some point in the evening of the 26th, the massive column of vehicles was spotted by coalition forces. With permission to attack received, U.S. Marine Corps A-6 intruders bombed the head and tail of the column, bottlenecking the Iraqi forces and trapping many of the vehicles. What followed has been described as a turkey shoot as the immobilized Iraqi column was bombed and strafed for the next 10 hours. By the end of the attack, well over 2,000 vehicles of various types were destroyed. Iraqi casualties are unknown for sure, with some estimates as low as 200 and some as high as 1,000. The reason behind the casualties being much lower than some claim them to be is the fact that many of the Iraqi soldiers fled their vehicles when they figured out they were stuck. Naturally, many ran away from the highway to escape certain death. So now where do the accusations of the attack being a war crime come from? Well, the most common claim I've seen is that the Iraqi troops were, quote, out of combat and therefore protected by international law, with many citing Article 3 of the Geneva Convention and claiming that the Iraqi soldiers qualified as hors de combat. Let's start with Article 3 of the Geneva Convention. Article 3 deals with prisoners of war and their treatment as far as the responsibility of the belligerent holding the POWs is concerned. It outlines things such as how they are to be treated, how they can be questioned, how they must be kept, and more. This entire article is completely irrelevant to any claim that has been violated since the Iraqi column that was retreating along Highway 80 weren't POWs and had not surrendered. What about the claim that the Iraqi Army qualified as hors de combat? Well, luckily, there's a very clear-cut definition of hors de combat. International humanitarian law, Rule 47, states the following pertaining to attacks against hors de combat and their definition. Attacking persons who are recognized as hors de combat is prohibited. A person hors de combat is A. Anyone who is in the power of an adverse party. B. Anyone who is defenseless because of unconsciousness, shipwreck, wounds, or sickness. Or C. anyone who clearly expresses an intention to surrender, provided he or she abstains from any hostile act and does not attempt to escape. So when they state anyone who is in the power of an adverse party, they specifically mean prisoners of war. Those individuals are generally under the guard of a belligerent party, and barring any attempt to escape or other hostile act, they are protected. This does not apply to the retreating Iraqi army. Anyone who is defenseless because of unconsciousness, wounds, or sickness is fairly obvious. Again, you shouldn't be attacking field hospitals or ambulances, since they are protected targets. This largely doesn't apply to the retreating Iraqi army. Now, this isn't to say there isn't the possibility of there having been wounded soldiers caught in the column and killed. I can't verify whether there actually were any or not. Also, it's important for me to point out that just because the Iraqi forces did not have an effective way to engage the attacking aircraft, that doesn't qualify them as defenseless. Finally, anyone who clearly expressed an intention to surrender. The retreating Iraqi army clearly had no intent to surrender. This would have been done by either waving a white flag or putting your arms up to show that you had no intent of continuing a hostile act. Even if the Iraqi army was going to surrender, the fact that they were withdrawing would qualify as an attempt to escape. And in addition, some of the vehicles fired upon the attacking aircraft. Again, this shows they had no intent to surrender, and if they did, they committed a hostile act which made them a valid military target. Another common claim is that the convoy was a mix of civilians and Iraqi soldiers, and that the coalition broke international law by knowingly bombing civilians. First and foremost, there is little to no evidence that any civilians were present in the convoy. Why would Kuwaiti citizens be fleeing into Iraq with the Iraqi army that had invaded and occupied them for 7 months? The logic doesn't hold up. There are also claims that the Iraqi army had Kuwaiti hostages in the convoy. Again, I have not seen a shred of evidence from either side of this claim. Even if true, the use of human shields is prohibited by international law, meaning Iraq would have committed a war crime themselves. With this evidence, I think I have firmly addressed the war crime accusations and proven that no war crime, as defined by international law, was committed. I do want to address other criticisms as well. Mainly, that Saddam's order to withdraw from Kuwait was to comply with Resolution 660, which required Iraq to withdraw to the pre-invasion borders. The main contention is that the column was attacked and destroyed while it was trying to fall in line with the resolution. This is just entirely false. Saddam ordered a fighting withdrawal, not the peaceful disengagement from Kuwait that the resolution demanded. In addition, Resolution 678 authorized the use of force in order to make Resolution 660 a reality. The evidence of this is the fact that Iraqi forces fought a delay in action at Kuwait International Airport in order to buy time for the main force to retreat on Highway 80. 19 Americans were killed in that battle that came after Saddam's order to withdraw. In addition, Saddam ordered his forces to ignite over 700 of Kuwait's oil wells. The fires would burn for nearly 10 months before being brought completely under control. Nearly 8 million barrels of oil were burned and released into the atmosphere, causing a massive environmental disaster. While not all of the wells were ignited during the retreat, many were, including this photo from April 1991 that shows fires burning almost adjacent to Highway 80. Again, as the Iraqis were retreating, they were still a valid military target as they were actively attacking civilian infrastructure. Saddam Hussein's order for his army to withdraw from Kuwait had nothing to do with some supposed change of heart and a desire to comply with Resolution 660. The order was given because his army was defeated. Even then, they continued to resist coalition forces and enacted a scorched earth policy on the way out. The targeting of a retreating convoy, given these conditions, was completely valid. I also want to address one more claim. That is, that it was overkill of a defeated enemy. While Iraq had clearly lost, they were attempting to salvage as much of their forces' equipment as well. The decision to attack the convoy was largely made with this in mind. The commander of coalition forces, Norman Schwarzkopf, states in 1995 that the first reason why we bombed the highway coming north out of Kuwait is that there was a great deal of military equipment on that highway, and I had given orders to all of my commanders that I wanted every piece of Iraqi equipment that we could possibly destroy. You have to remember the context surrounding the war. The Iraqi Army was the fourth largest in the world, and Iraq had recently finished fighting the nearly 8-year-long Iran-Iraq War, a war which Iraq initiated by invading Iran. The war left Iraq in so much debt that they initiated the invasion of Kuwait to secure their oil revenues. Saddam had also been saber-rattling towards Saudi Arabia, leading to fears of an invasion of that nation as well. This was the primary reason for U.S. troops to be deployed in the first place. While the primary goal of the Gulf War was to expel Iraq from Kuwait, a secondary goal was to degrade Iraq's ability to wage war on its neighbors for the foreseeable future. The merits of that strategy can be debated. The fact of the matter is, Iraq had been the instigator in two large-scale wars, the second of which occurred against a much smaller and weaker neighbor. Denying Iraq the ability to do that again, while brutal in its imagery, was justifiable in my opinion. I think I've pretty well established that the attack on Highway 80 by the coalition, despite its nickname, was not a war crime. It was an attack upon a legitimate military target against an enemy that was still engaged in active hostilities. While I doubt the people who need to see this video actually will, I hope it can help provide you with the arguments necessary to refute the claims that it was a war crime. I will, of course, link my sources below for you to peruse at your own convenience. In the meantime, please like the video so it can reach as many people as possible, and if you know anyone who has made any war crime claims, be sure to send it their way, even if it is fruitless. Also, you can find me on Twitter at todayshistory13, and maybe you can help me fight the good fight, if that's even possible on that cesspool of a platform. With that being said, I'll see you on the next one.